Howdy folks, Justin here, and today we're going to be talking about the 9 cards that are being changed in the balance patch that's coming out today. Um, First of all, I want to say I'm really excited that Direwolf is continuing to push out these balance changes. I think it's cool, I think it's a good sign for the future of the game, and I appreciate that they are as involved as they are in keeping the cards changing a little bit, changing up the meta that way. That said, um, I am quite surprised by some of the changes that went through today. Um, so let's dive on in and talk about these cards one by one. I'm going to start with Crystal Tower Crafter. This got changed from a 2/2 for 2 to a 1/1 for 2 with the same ability. This is basically the same sort of change that Rothgar Kingpin and Murkwater Savage, I think, the green guy that gets +1/+1 when you play another green guy, they both got. Um, all cards that just escalate very quickly and are hard to deal with. Crystal Tower Crafter is now, executable by your opponent, even if you play it and then ward it immediately with lesser ward. As far as how I feel about the necessity of this change, there's two different. I have two different thoughts about it. The first is that I don't think this card is particularly oppressive right now, but I can see where it severely limits the printing of zero-cost spells. It is a sort of card that um, here's the thing. I don't think that nerfing this card is going to destroy an archetype. I think that it is going to make Action Mage, the budget Action Mage list that I like to play once in a while and show off on the channel, noticeably worse because this is one of the ways that you win that game. But that speaks to the power level of the card and not necessarily the playability of the deck in general. Um, I don't feel that this card is the most threatening card in the game right now, but I totally understand the nerf, and I think I think it's okay. Um, I think it puts a slight hamper in the plans of Action Assassin, which is a deck that can be really unfun to play against. I think it's a small hit to some of the Battle Mage lists that are out there, although not exactly the sort of hit I was hoping to see the Battle Mage decks receive. But we'll get into that a little bit more later. Overall, I'm pretty satisfied with this change. I think the card is still playable. I just don't think it's great anymore. I think it's only playable. Just like Murkwater Savage, I think is still actually playable in the right list, in the right circumstances, but it's not nearly as good as a lot of the other things you can be doing at that Magicka cost. I think in blue, there aren't a whole lot of blue 2-drops that you want to play over this. There's Wardcrafter, which I think is significantly better than this new nerf version of Crystal Tower Crafter. But other than that, Dunmer Nightblade, it might be better in the right list, but Crystal Tower Crafter I think still is playable and worth your time. So we will go ahead and proceed to the next image. Okay, let's talk about Dune Smuggler and then Dune Stalker. Dune Smuggler is a card I like a lot, and it used to be the purpose of this card was occasionally for the +1/+1, but largely just to avoid opposing guard and lethal creatures and unfavorable trades your opponent might be making. Sometimes you use these cards defensively in order to remove an opposing threat, but that's not probably how most people are using them. Um, I think that the change to the card is. So obviously what it's doing now is it's replacing the creature. Like you have a valuable creature in a lane with a guard creature. In order to move that guy, smuggle him to freedom, if you will, you're going to have to sacrifice your Dune Smuggler now. I think that is probably a fair trade considering the buff that you're giving it to and the fact that you're leaving a 3/1 on the board. I think this card's power level was really high, and I think it's still above average, and I think it's still playable. I don't really understand necessarily why this card got nerfed right now because I feel like the latter is bereft with sorcerers and battle mages and not so much Pilfer Monk and Archer. Although it's possible that the developers have a deck list we don't have that is particularly oppressive, and I will say I think Archer is still really good. It's just not popular at the moment, and Dune Smuggler definitely fits into that strategy. I think the card's playability has been significantly decreased because the types of things you want to do with it, like you're in the types of situation where you're going to be smuggling a creature to freedom, you're probably sacrificing your smuggler now, um, as opposed to just getting free value and stranding a guard creature in the opposing lane. That said, that was an incredibly powerful ability, so it's possible that this one was necessary from a general viewpoint, kind of like some of the other nerfs as I'm going to get to. I don't think that this was necessarily necessary for the current meta. I don't think it hurts the meta right now. I'm kind of surprised. It may be a sign of future things to come and things that Direwolf was worried were going to happen in the future. I'm okay with this overall. Pilfer Monk is not a fun deck to lose to. It's a fun deck to play every now and then, but it's also fairly ridiculous in one of the few ways you can, kill your opponent on turn 4. Um, yeah, I'm okay with this. It doesn't really bother me. I'm surprised that it hit now when Dune Smuggler sees less play than it's ever seen before, but it is what it is. Um, Alongside that is the nerf to Dune Stalker, which has a similar mechanical change. Now it has to be summoned into the same lane as the creature that it's moving. Kind of feel the same way about it. Dune Stalker, of course, sees play in some prophecy lists where Dune Smuggler does not, but I think Dune Stalker is a worse card overall because I think that the +1/+1 buff, really, the flexibility that adds to Dune Stalker or Dune Smuggler is really valuable. That said, I feel like the playability of this one was diminished a lot less because, the tempo advantage you're getting from triggering a prophecy creature like this is still significant enough that the types of decks who would want to run this effect are probably going to still run it. So, now let's look at Pillaging Tribune. This is one of two nerfs that I'm most surprised by. And here's a summary of my thoughts on this. There have definitely been games that I've lost because my control mage opponent landed Pillaging Tribune, or my control spell sword opponent landed Pillaging Tribune, and and I was doing everything I needed to do responsibly as the more aggressive player in that position to win the game, and Pillaging Tribune then makes the game unwinnable for you. There are also those situations where, there's an Odiving on the board or a 12 power creature of some other kind, and you land a Pillaging Tribune, and then the game becomes basically unwinnable. To have a 5 magic epic make the game swing the game that largely is definitely something I would be worried about if I was a developer of this game. That said, in the current meta, I feel like Pillaging Tribune fills a very important role as one of the few tools that can allow a slower deck to combat the aggressiveness of Battle Mage and Sorcerer decks. The fact that there was no hit to Blackworm Necromancer either means that the fact that the life gain potential for an opposing deck was hit, I mean, I'm just sort of surprised by this, to be honest with you. I understand that Pillaging Tribune is oftentimes not fun to play against. I think it's a tool that was fairly necessary in a couple of deck archetypes. Um, it remains to be seen whether or not this destroys Control Mage, but I feel like it definitely hurts it a lot. I think Control Spell Sword is going to be okay because Control Spell Sword, I feel like, is in some ways better positioned to handle the Battle Mage and the Control Spell Sword decks. But I'm very surprised by this. I feel like it's probably a good change for the game in a vacuum, but right now I'm a little dismayed because of the oppressive, what I feel of as the oppressive nature of the Battle Mage prophecy lists and the Spell Sword kind of mid-range aggro value thing. Oh, no, sorry, not Spell Sword, Sorcerer. I would continue to play this in every list I was already playing it in. I think your decks just got worse. It's not like there's another option really for you to play in that slot that does anything similar to this. I mean, you have the Relentless Templar or whatever, the 5/2, that when it dies you gain 5 life. People looked at that card when Moonlight Werebat was nerfed, and that card just never really holds up. Um, Pretty disappointed in this change, although I think in the long term it may be a good thing. Right now it's frustrating. Kind of have the same thoughts on Snaketooth Necklace. Snaketooth Necklace being changed to having a one-turn drain effect sort of makes this a lot worse. Now, Snake-Tooth Necklace can be used for probably not its intended purpose in decks like Archer, where you're trying to stay ahead in life the whole time so that you can trigger Soul Rust Marshal and Triumphant Jarl. However, I think the problem cards in that deck are Triumphant Jarl and Soul Rust Marshal, and not Snake-Tooth Necklace. Snake-Tooth Necklace is the best way for any deck running green to fight against Prophecy, um, Prophecy Battle Mage, and also does a lot of work in Pilfer Scout, or sorry, in Pilfer Monk as well. It definitely does some work in Scout. It's probably at its least fun in Archer and Scout, but I'm kind of surprised by this again. Again, ultimately, I think that this is the kind of card that probably the nerf itself is reasonable in a vacuum again, but in the current meta, I just feel like it's so necessary to have these sorts of tools when you're playing anything trying to get, win the game after turn 6 or 7, and you're playing against Sorcerer or Battle Mage aggro. Um, Between this and the hit to Hissgrove, which we're going to talk about here in a second, I'm sort of the opinion that Scout. I've always loved playing Scout. I don't film as much with it anymore because it's gotten really popular. I feel like it was a solid tier 2 deck, maybe tier 1 with the right list for the last couple months. I feel like the change to Hissgrove and the change to Snake-Tooth Necklace are significant enough to make that deck considerably worse. I think you're going to have to do a much more careful job teching that deck against aggro, and in turn, basically forfeiting your match against Spell Sword Control and Mage Control, and probably Battle Mage, Relentless Raider, Supreme Atromancer. Supreme Atromancer, by the way, another card I'm kind of surprised didn't see any changes this patch. Yeah, so let's get to Slaughterfish Spawning. Slaughterfish Spawning is the nerf I am most in favor of here. Slaughterfish Spawning is an incredibly powerful card. Upping the cost to 4, I think, I don't think it makes it unplayable. I think it's still insane in Arena. I mean, 2 bodies like this. But on turn 4, that's the turn where your opponent's laying down Hive Defenders, if they're the kind of person who's fighting against this sort of thing. Not being able to go turn 1, Ring of Magicka out a Crystal Tower Crafter, turn 2 Ring of Magicka out a Slaughterfish Spawning, is going to hit certain assassin builds pretty hard. That's one of the best openers for any of those action-based decks, and that's been hit very hard. But I think Slaughterfish Spawning is just sort of stifling in power level. I think that as a neutral card, you either want. I think neutral cards should be a couple different things. Either Dwemer, because that's thematically on point. I think they should be utility cards that fulfill a purpose at a weaker power level than a color that can already access that. Vicious Dreg being the best example that I can think of. Crushing Blow also sort of filling that role. Or sort of wacky effects that don't fit into any color's particular skill set, like Wabbajack, that, although you can make a case that Wabbajack could be a blue card, that sort of, all colors should have access to, but all colors wouldn't benefit from running. I think I said a couple weeks ago in a video that almost any deck can benefit from running Slaughterfish Spawning. I don't put it in every deck I run, but I probably should. That's how powerful this card was. The casting cost change hits it really hard because the decks that want to play this aren't looking to run a whole lot of things that cost 4 or more. This is the only hit in this balance patch to Sorcerer aggro, Sorcerer mid-range aggro value, whatever you want to call that deck, and Battle Mage aggro. I don't think it's enough to do much of anything to those decks because those decks are full of other powerful things that they're doing. But it is a hit to them. Slaughterfish Spawning, I think the biggest hit is going to be to Prophecy or Action Assassin, and although it's not played much, to to Action Mage. In general, I'm glad to see this card nerfed. It, like I said, I think it sort of stifles what you want to be doing with a 3 magic and neutral action card, and I look forward to seeing what other cards people run in this place. And I expect it to still be played. I just don't think it's nearly as good. Next, we have Soul Rust Marshal. Soul Rust Marshal has been nerfed several times over the course of the game. Now its current iteration is a 6 magic of 4/4 that reduces the next card you play this turn by 6. Yeah, when it started, well, when it started, it used to be before this. It was a five magic of 4/4 that reduced the next card you play this turn by five. Before that, it was a five magic of 4/4 that reduced the next card you play this turn by six. So they're sort of skirting around here. I think that one thing we need to acknowledge is that Direwolf really likes this mechanic. People have been complaining about these this life totals matters cards since closed beta. I mean, and the changes have been really sort of incremental. And a lot of times I appreciate that they're being subtle about their changes and keeping cards playable while not, keeping them at the same power level they're at. But I mean, I'm just not a huge fan of this mechanic. I feel like it's a severe punishment for a player who is one life behind, and that the intended purpose has always been stated of these cards that they are there to make sure that a player who's going face, who is the aggressor and knows they're the aggressor from the minute they start playing, doesn't just lose to an opponent who's never breaking their runes because of the way the runes system works in this game. However, I feel like I mean, not a developer here, right? But I feel like there's got to be a better way to do that because these cards are so swingy, and the fact that they trigger off one life mattering, I'm just sort of not a fan of them in general. Soul Rest Marshal, I think this hit is actually bigger than it looks at first, turning it to a six magic card. I mean, this card sees play in Archer, it sees play in some Scout decks that I've seen recently, and it sees play in some Monk lists. Uh, I think I feel like Archer might still run this because Archer can still, on turn six, lay down a Marshal and then a Jarl. I feel like Monk probably won't run it. I feel like in this case, Monk probably wants to play Golden Saint instead. I feel like the Scout decks that are running this aren't very good, but Scout sort of losing their not losing, but Scout's Histgrove and Snake Necklace being nerfed may result in them trying a new approach. I don't know. I suppose anytime these cards get worse, I'm happy. So I think this is a pretty, and again, it is a subtle change. And it's not even totally clear that it's a nerf because it is, the reduction has been increased again. It's certainly a nerf from the original version of the card, but sort of indifferent about this right now. I'm not sure how it's going to impact things because the card doesn't see a ton of play right now. Um, I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think Archer's still a good deck. It just doesn't see a whole lot of play right now. This will impact its, play a little bit, but not a lot. Uh, you know, the ship has sort of sailed, in my opinion, in the meta right now for the nerfed Source Marshal. If any of these life total matters cards were going to get nerfed in this patch, I was hoping it was Blackworm Necromancer. I even took it out of my Orc list um, because I was fairly certain it was going to get hit as a sort of unfun card that would do a little bit of damage to the power level of the Sorcerer deck that's really big right now, but I was mistaken. Um, yeah, I don't know. I am glad this change happened. I support this change, and I'm not just in general. I'm kind of surprised. It doesn't really seem like a high priority change to make right now, but it's possible that we're going to see an expansion in the reasonable future, and it could be that this interacted so unfunly, making up words here, with something in that expansion that this needed to happen, and they're giving us time to adjust to it. Finally, we have a change to Histgrove. A lot of people have been asking for this change. Now it says at the start of your turn, if you have 15 or more max Magicka, you sacrifice and get a Swamp Leviathan in each lane. I think this change is totally fine and on point. I think it does hurt the playability of the Scout Ramp deck quite a bit. Um, it now means that your opponent playing any sort of support removal can hold on to it for the whole game and have an answer to it. There were already answers to having both lanes full of Swamp Leviathans. I mean, I've had great success with Immolating Blast lately, but I certainly understand that Histgrove is a very powerful card. I guess I'll say that. Um, it propped up an archetype that very few people were playing that I really enjoyed playing, but it made it so popular that in fact that I kind of stopped playing it. I think Histgrove. The truth of the matter is that I like Histgrove as a card because it gives when it was first previewed, I said I like this card specifically because it opens up enough ramp cards to non-scout decks that any deck running purple could have a ramp package. And I really like that idea because I like ramping in general. It's a fun thing to do, in my opinion. Um, I played a season of Big Dumb Sorcerer using this card. That said, given the hits that Control Mage is going to take with the change to Pillaging Tribune, I suppose it's reasonable that you would change Hisgrove too. Hisgrove kind of being responsible for the decline in popularity of Control Mage a while back. I support this change in general. Um, again, it's a sort of subtle change that I really appreciate. I think Hisgrove is still playable. It's just a little worse. I don't think it was oppressive, but I mean, there may be numbers coming out of Direwolf that I'm not familiar with. I know that I have a pretty good win rate against Ramp Scout with pretty much every deck I play, but I can see a world where Ramp Scout is oppressive at the lower ranks, like rank 12 through like rank 7 or something like that, because it's a fairly straightforward deck to play. To master it, there are obviously some interactions that require a lot of consideration, but just removing things and ramping into Histgrove is, of course, a pretty easy strategy all on its own. So maybe it's because of what's going on up there, sort of like the nerf to Divine Fervor. Spellsword Tokens being a deck that we really didn't see a lot if you haven't left rank 5 since August, but a deck that probably was all over the rank 12 meta, if you will. So yeah, I support this change. I would like to see more ramp cards in the future. I'd like to see at least one more purple ramp card so we can keep expanding the opportunities for different colors to ramp. But yeah, I think the card's still playable. I think that it's changed. The change is least impactful in Spell Sword control, which I think is a good sort of underplayed deck, and I'm eager to brew with that actually. So that is my thoughts on the changes. I hope everyone is looking forward to doing a little bit of brewing when the game comes back up. I will see you all on the ladder and have a great afternoon. Bye bye.